you don't need to move a mountain, but the single biggest thing that an individual person can do to get closer to that gender equality in sport, but probably in life, is to call it out when you see it. Rather than seeing something and thinking, me not saying anything isn't going to make a difference. If enough people say something, it will make a difference. So it's that sort of like, I'm just a single drop, but if there's 100 of us, we've almost filled a bucket sort of mentality. So don't feel like, you're not equipped to have these conversations. You absolutely are. Yep. And I think that's one of the powers of sport, actually, is to bring these conversations to people who might not necessarily engage with them.
Welcome back to another episode of Ride to Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. I'm your host, Pedro Couto Lopez. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name. And in podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. Chloe Hosking is a Commonwealth Games gold medalist. She is one of the most respected cyclists of her generation, but her journey didn't stop at the finish line. She continued her journey by disrupting the industry. She's now a qualified lawyer, using her voice and expertise to advocate for athletes' rights and better governance in sport, and she's the founder of Hosking Bikes, a purpose-driven bike brand on a mission to make cycling more accessible, inclusive, and community-focused. In this episode, we unpack her decision to walk away from the World Tour, how Chloe rebuilt life outside of pro sport, and why she believes the future of cycling is going to be shaped by female leadership. So get ready for an insightful conversation with Chloe. Now, back to the podcast. Welcome, Chloe, to Ride to Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Honestly, I feel like people must say it all the time, but long-time listener, first-time caller, that's what I'm feeling like right now.
Brilliant. Well, you're also making history on the podcast, not only as the first founder of the bike brand, recording an episode with Ride to Success, but most importantly, you are the very first female road cyclist to have launched her own bike company. So 2 firsts in one go. Brilliant. Couldn't have asked
there's not
for more.
many of us, so it might be a while until you get the next one that can repeat that.
It's true. So I wanted to go straight into kind of the deep end. And when I say we, I say mostly I know about your professional career, and we're going to delve a little bit about that. But a lot has been talked about at length about your road cycling career. And, the purpose of the podcast is to try to take people on a learning journey. And I kind of wanted to kind of understand a bit more about the person and focus a bit more on that aspect, the motivations, the purpose, the legacy. And, you had an incredible career, 13 years. You have won major cycling races, Commonwealth gold medals in 2018 road race. I mean, and one thing that straight out of the gate, I want to understand what is the lessons, or one lesson that you have learned and now you apply to your career as a lawyer, as a founder of Hosking Bikes. What is a few things or one thing that you have learned and now you're applying to your business, your entrepreneurial side?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question and also an important question. So thank you. Because I think it's something that a lot of athletes, not just cyclists, struggle with when they transition out of sport. It's what am I if I'm not an athlete, if I'm not a cyclist? What skills do I have? And I think that there's a lot of the messaging that is aimed at athletes is that all you are is an athlete. And that's just not the reality at all. When you're
Mhm.
competing at the highest level of your sport, which I was for 13 years, you're learning all these skills that are just so transferable to life outside of
Yeah.
sport. And it's something I learned very quickly when I retired in 2023, and I'm still learning today.
Right.
So when had this opportunity to jump on the podcast and speak with you, I started, reflecting a bit more, and the question, what is the one thing I've gained from sport and now I'm putting into business, into my law, into my running a bike company? There's not just one thing, because I learned so
Sure. Yeah.
much. So I think potentially one of the strongest and maybe underrated is just the soft skills. I've been
Mm.
in rooms with CEOs. I've worked with people from Germany, from the Netherlands, from Japan, from Italy since I was 18. And
Yeah.
these are things that can take decades to learn in a professional career, whether on a bike or in an office. And so I
Mhm.
have taken all that into my life on the other side of sport.
Yeah.
And it's also the things that you're not taught in law school. I finished my law degree, and we spend our days trying to avoid applying law, because when you've gotten to that point, it's probably gone too far. You're trying to work through and manage relationships to make sure
Mm.
that actually you can work together to find an agreement that works for both parties. And that's what you learn day in, day out, in a bike team. It's, how do I get the most for me out of this? How do I
Yeah.
make sure I'm executing on the expectations of my team, of my teammates? And I think that's something that probably a lot of athletes don't appreciate enough that they're learning. And I hope as these conversations are
Mhm.
continue to be had, there's more and more recognition of that going forward.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting point that you mentioned about, for instance, the soft skills, because there is, you know, I have seen many athletes, not just cyclists, but many elite athletes being able to transition into corporate world, into the business side of things. I mean, I wouldn't say easily, because I'm looking from the outside, and it always looks easy from the outside. But
Exactly.
they have transitioned, and not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them will be also successful in their other endeavors after their sporting career. And there is. I remember a few years ago that I believe the bank Goldman Sachs was offering internships to retired elite athletes, because you the skills of the job you can teach on the job, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the mindset, is kind of that drive that the athlete kind of nurtures over the years, and that's as an essence of a personality, of the character of the person, is what
Yeah.
kind of allows you to succeed in those like high pressure
No,
situations in
yeah,
those
you're
jobs.
absolutely right. And there is a mindset that goes with being a high performance athlete. It's this incredible work ethic, it's this drive to succeed, it's this ability to set goals and work
Mm.
towards them. And that obviously this is all transferable. And there's also
Yeah.
a tenacity, I think, that was consistent across the women that I raced with, and the men also. It's that it's almost a skill that's difficult to teach, and it's exactly what you're saying. There's a recognition from big corporations now. We have similar structures in Australia. Some of our big four firms, like Deloitte, has an Olympians program, because there's
Hmm.
that recognition that uh, that there's a work ethic that can be applied to various things, but
Yeah.
still can get great outcomes. And that's what athletes do day in, day out, year in, year out. So yeah, I talk about the soft skills, but obviously, as I said, there's no one thing. I'm so grateful for my time cycling because I recognize that it was almost like an MBA that took 13 years to complete.
Yeah,
And I'm now putting it into practice.
really. That's a great. That's this great description of of your sporting career. It's probably not many, not some. It's not heard a lot, but it's a great way of describing that. All that learnings that kind of encapsulated and then put it into practice in the
Yeah.
business world. But I mean, I think we need to acknowledge that not every athlete will be able to have that kind of transition, because rightly or wrongly, and correct me if you're wrong, there is a big part of you that kind of is you stop it, something that you have worked tirelessly day and night, the 1%, the famous term that you work and strive for, but then that stops, and many athletes struggle with that. It's, kind of the same process of having to stop their careers and transition to something else, and you had quite an abrupt ending to your sporting career, from what I understand, with the
Yeah,
collapse of the BB hotels.
yeah, sorry,
With
you
BB
keep going.
hotels, yeah, that's fine. With the collapse of the BB hotels women's racing team, and obviously with the kind of looking outward from the outside, that feels extremely unfortunate, but you have come back stronger from that collapse. And has there been any during the time the collapse and kind of then kind of reshifting your mindset and your priorities? What I'm trying to get at is, there's a lot of uncertainty when the dream, the career that you've been building then suddenly stops, and you are in a position where you don't want to be. You are put against the wall, so to speak. How do you manage that uncertainty? Because that is a scenario that a lot of people will be faced, whether it is unemployment, dismissal, whether it is a business that collapse. And you, from that, again, touching upon your that insights from your career stopping, unfortunately stopping, and then having to kind of repurpose your ambition towards something else. How do you deal with that uncertainty?
Yeah, I think so much to unpack. The word you used, repurpose, just if you get rid of the re in the purpose, it's so important. And I just was reading an article recently with Lizzie Deignan, ahead of Roubaix, and she said she's retiring at the end of this year, and she said, I don't know who I am without cycling. And it's this massive identity shift for athletes who are retiring. And then the reality is, it's the very few athletes who get that fairy tale ending, who get to retire on top, who it's their choice. Many athletes have their lived experience is they get injured, their contract doesn't get renewed, or in my instance, the team that you had signed with collapses 2 weeks before the season is due to start. And I won't say that there's any like blueprint that can be just copied and pasted and applied to everybody's situation. It's for individual athletes to be able to sort of muddle their way through. But how I did it was, I found that I had to very quickly try and regain control of the situation. So for those who don't know the context, was racing with Trek Segafredo for 2021, 2022, and I made the decision to sign with what was a newly launching women's team, B&B Hotels. They already had a men's team, and the story we were told was they were expanding, which made sense. The Women's Tour de France Femmes was launching, and it's a French team. There was really a lot of hype around it, and it seemed like a natural progression of the team growing. What had happened was they signed or made commitments to all the riders before they had brought on enough sponsorship to run the team. So I was on a training camp in Tenerife, 2 weeks. It was the 13th of December, actually. I remember the day. We were dialed into a Zoom conference with all the team, and we were told there is no team. You're free to find new employment. And my face was just blank, and I was told to smile, and I couldn't believe it. I thought, my career is, hanging on a thread here, and I'm being told to smile. No, this isn't a situation that I will smile at. So
Hold on. Were you? Who told you to smile? Hold on. I want to know that detail.
Jerome Pinot, so the I guess team manager of the team. And so I think everybody was a bit dumbfounded in the situation. I made the decision to go home to Australia very quickly to sort of recalibrate. And I spoke to some other teams. I got some contract offers. I felt like they were not reflective of what I was worth. And I made the decision to, as I said, try and take control of the situation. And so I made the decision not to return to Europe and retire and finish my law degree. So, I was about 4/5 of the way through. And that's, for me, how I really tried to reframe the decision-making process. But then there was this other element, which was what is my purpose if it's not to ride a bike and win races? And I very quickly was able to sort of refocus that purpose onto players' rights and players' advocacy, because I was so just dumbfounded in how this situation could happen, and there were so little protections available for athletes, and people didn't seem to care. And I thought, how can more than 70 people, riders and staff, be impacted, and our industry cares so little? So I really threw myself into learning more about labor law and how it applies to athletes, to player associations. I did an internship with a trade union in Australia, and then I started working at a law firm. So that's how I did it. And I feel very lucky in that I was able to find a new purpose very quickly, because while I talk about athletes, very few having that fairy tale ending, there's also very few that can pivot that quickly and really, refine their identity outside of sport. And I know it can be a really difficult process. And luckily, it's a conversation that's starting to be had more and more. I think that there's a recognition around the armed forces when people retire from them at a similar age to elite athletes. There's support around guiding them through that transition. And now that's starting to happen more and more with athletes. I also think that there's a duty of care from sporting organizations, teams, governing bodies around, if you have institutionalized these athletes from when they were 12 until when they are 30, 35, 40, it can't just be a sharp knife through the relationship done. I think that there is becoming more and more recognition that supports need to be, if not offered during the career, then offered definitely for the few years post-career.
Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, there is a lot to unpack there. I mean, so first of all, let me just go step by step here. So otherwise, I'll trip over. Uh, so I mean, fundamentally, you kind of the from what you're telling, the person and the character that you have allowed you to, reassess how this could be changed and how you as a person could have an impact on that. And that's how you have then kind of used the law degree that you're completing at the time and kind of found energy to go and tackle those issues that you just mentioned. And you were also an unfortunate consequence of that, to kind of put yourself into in the driving seat and okay, how can we change this? But as you rightly said, it's not is those are is not something that is easily doable, because you already had kind of set that process in motion through your own interest in law, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
Your own interest
absolutely.
in those issues, because it's, when we look at cycling, when we read, watch interviews from pro cyclists, and you mentioned, and they are so focused on cycling. Cycling is through and through what they do every day, all hours of the day. And when that's gone, you need to find something else to focus your energy on. But the other aspect is, and there is multiple ways of doing this, is in finding a new way, finding a new purpose, finding new sources of income, and using the skills that, the MBA that took you 13 years to gain through through your professional career as a cyclist, and to put it to practice. We see it, or I see it, with athletes now. Some, not all of them, but yes, like your case, taking degrees. And that this seems to be a case as well, from what I stand, and correct me if I'm wrong, a case in women cycling, where some riders will have to self-fund or complement their salaries in order to, well, do what they enjoy the most, which is ride bikes. And a easy way that, not an easy way, but a quick way that is at everyone's fingerprints is social media. Is how do I leverage this tool to get more people knowing about my story, my journey, so that I can then leverage this into a career in, whether it is working within the brand, working as a commentator, working within the industry at large, because you have built over the years that, well, personal branding, that kind of that person significance, that that kind of image resonates with the audience that enjoys cycling. And you have built that through your cycling career. But in women's cycling, that, there are less opportunities. And what I mean by this is that, and and this is me looking from the outside. I don't have the live experience, so you please tell me if I'm wrong, or correct me at all. That women seem to have to face and fight harder for opportunities. And this is something that you are very passionate, and you talk and you advocate very, that's one of your purposes that you have, to change the narrative, to make the sport, the women's side of cycling, more equitable, more representative, to bring more opportunities to women cycling. And I'm interested to find out, looking back at your professional career, what were the biggest challenges and that you faced as a cyclist, as a female cyclist, and to where you are now sitting as the sport evolved enough?
I think, yeah, of exactly where to start. What were the biggest challenges that I faced during my career, and where is the sport going, or where should the sport go now? I think some of the biggest challenges is, it's not going to be news to anyone. It's the inequality of opportunity. It's the inequality of pay. But then I think there's also the element where your achievements don't have the same recognition as your male counterparts. And that's also a struggle. So we talk about commercializing, our impact or our results, achievements in the sport. And if it's not being given the same recognition, your ability to commercialize it is less. I think that is changing. I think particularly outside of the sport, it's changing. Pauline Ferrand-Prévost's win on the weekend at Paris-Roubaix is held in equal regard as Mathieu van der Poel's. Where I think the cycling in particular has a long way to go is to be making sure that within our industry, that equality of recognition is had. But having stepped out of cycling, I can see that when you're outside of that bubble, a stage win at the Tour de France or La Vuelta or the Giro is just as people are just as enamored with it as my male counterparts. So that's a good thing. There is also greater opportunities coming for women, whether that's through stepping into team management. We're seeing more and more female directors. We're seeing more and more female performance coaches. So that's great, because I think what a lot of athletes, in particular male athletes, you would see them bring their knowledge from the sport back into those management level roles where that wasn't necessarily an option for women even 5 years ago. So that equality of opportunity is leveling. It's not equal yet. Pay, we're not there. And then people will level economic and commercial arguments at you, and I don't even engage in those discussions. I remember when I was racing, the then president of the UCI said that women didn't warrant yet a minimum salary, and I was outspoken at the time. And I think it's the typical, if an organization can't pay a minimum salary, they probably shouldn't have a team in the first place. So my idea hasn't changed. I think I've addressed your questions there.
Yeah. I mean, I think I want to underline that point. It's that the fact that only recently I don't want to make a mistake here, but I don't know exactly the date, but it was not it's like 2 years ago, 1 year ago, where the minimum salary was introduced to World Tour women's cycling. I can't exactly pinpoint the year.
Yeah, the minimum salary, I think, was introduced in, and again, I don't know the exact year, but we have the Cyclist Alliance to really thank for that, for advocating for that. Definitely around 2020, around this time, and so we had the World Tour teams introduced a minimum salary. It wasn't the same as the men's World Tour, and then we had this year was introduced the Pro Continental, so that the level under the World Tour, they also have a minimum salary now. So you sort of have this tiered approach. I think from a recognition that some smaller teams can't afford the minimum salary of the World Tour, in which case they don't get all the benefits of having that World Tour license, and they're at that Pro Tour. So I think that that's a sensible approach, and I don't think that you can underestimate the impact that this introduction of minimum salaries has had on the professionalization and the quality of the women's peloton. The growth from when I started racing to now is just exponential. And it would be really an interesting study for anybody interested in research to look at, for example, like the power numbers from when minimum salaries were introduced to now, because I think facilitating this opportunity where all you have to do, or your choice is to just cycle, the improvement and ability to improve is just, it's not even comparable. So it's quite interesting, and I really enjoy looking at these issues and interrogating them and thinking about them critically. And probably that's one of my favorite things since retiring, is like the brain fog is gone. So I'm not permanently tired and I can actually like spend more time engaging with these issues. And I do genuinely enjoy it.
Brilliant. I mean, that was, you might have already answered the question I was going to ask you, which was what if there's one thing that you miss the most, and one that you don't miss, and I know, is that the things that you miss and don't miss about professional cycling, or is there something else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I so enjoyed my time as a professional cyclist. I think I probably, in the moment, didn't appreciate it enough, as is the way when you're young and you think it will always be like this. Probably the thing I miss the most, and I was warned, so I should have known. I had a girlfriend say to me, we were sitting at a table when I said, I don't know what to do. Do I take what was a shitty contract and go back to Europe and race, or do I like come back to Canberra and retire? And she said, you'll never be as fit as you are now. And I thought, you're like, I'll always be this fit, it'll be fine. She was right. It's only gone downhill. And even when I ride my bike now and I feel great, I had a Strava notification come out on the weekend and I was out on my bike feeling really good. And then I got a comparison from like 2018 when I won the Commonwealth Games, and when I won, I don't know, I won a lot of races that year. I was I was half. Okay, so how do I phrase this? The pace this weekend compared to then was double. So right. I was very slow. But what I do, as I said, what I do enjoy now is that I have more time to engage with issues that I really care about, while still being able to enjoy my cycling, just not at the same level.
I think there is always, I mean, when kind of it's recognizing sometimes that there is, it's a different chapter, and there is bigger and better things that you can now achieve with the work you do, as a lawyer, as a founder, and I think that's also sometimes the way, as an athlete, you can't always be at the top of the podium. There's always going to be someone else. The sport evolves. It's interesting. There is so much that you put into making sure that you are at the top of your game. You are winning races, but it's hard to kind of put that into perspective. But as you are doing it right now, it's like the background that you have. It puts you in the 1% of the population, if not the 0.1%. So it's already kind of, a lot of achievements, a lot of accomplishments that have come your way. And so my point with this is that there is different paths that you take in life, and then in doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It just is the way sometimes life takes you. And before I move on, I wanted to I just quickly brush to the next question, where about what you miss and don't miss the most. But I think it's important to go back to what you were saying and reiterate about the minimum salary for pro Conti and World Tour cycling teams, because that is from where I stand as an enthusiast, as a kind of a lover of bike racing, and also wanting to support women's cycling. I think that is a huge step towards gaining more kind of equity within the sport, because it, as you rightly said, it just creates a more balanced opportunities. Cycling, as it it presents quite a big investment, and if you bring that base salary in, allows to create more of a path to people, to women, to girls that wouldn't have that opportunity if they don't have the means to get there. So it just introduces kind of I wouldn't say a level playing field, but introduces a kind of a stepping stone for a wider pool of young girls, of female riders, to step into the ranks of professional cycling. So I just
Yeah,
wanted to come back to
absolutely.
that, because I think is important. I quickly moved on, but I think it's important to
No, it
reiterate
is.
that.
And like, probably what is one of the biggest changes since, I went to Europe and I signed my first professional contract in 2010 till now is that cycling for a female is now a viable career option, and that you cannot underestimate. I think that the sport in the next 5 to 8 years is going to be unrecognizable. And a large part of that is because of that introduction of the minimum salary, and the sort of the impact that's had on the professionalization of the sport. I did some work for a football player association,
Yeah.
and football, while through some collective bargaining agreements negotiated at like national level with their leagues, they don't have a minimum salary mandated by like their
Okay.
governing body, and that has a huge impact. A lot of footballers have to have that dual job. I think FIFA released a report recently where the average salary was 8,000 euros a year. Like, how do you
God.
improve the sport when women are trying to sustain themselves on that? You can't. So
You can't. No. Yeah.
it's something that cycling should be really proud of. It's not an end point. We're still not at the same minimum salary as the men, and
Yeah.
that's something to continue striving towards.
For sure. For sure. And I mean, and this is something also that you're doing now that you have stepped out of the professional racing, but you are also now in a different position as a founder of Hosking Bikes. Is also something that you are um, working towards, having more girls, having more women ride bikes, kind of lowering the entry level, if you will. And I mean, I don't think this probably question has been asked. You've been asked this question many times, but I think it's critical to understand in the origin story of Hosking Bikes. Where did it started, and what inspired you to start?
Yeah. Oh, it's I think, like, when you talk about origin stories, it's such a great question, because where the actual like business started from was a conversation with my husband and I about launching a bike brand, from a recognition that the industry is saturated by men, and there's very few women advocating for women in the sport. But when you really peel back the layers, and what is the purpose of our brand, what is the real values of our brand, is from my joy of cycling and my appreciation of what I've gained from cycling, which is like confidence, community, connection. I got that all when I was 12 and started cycling with my
Yeah.
dad. So that's really what our brand is. It's a commitment that we've made to try and first of all get more women into all levels of the industry, whether that's at grassroots cycling, whether that's at, racing on the world tour, and for sure in those decision making roles, but doing that from a bottom up rather than a top down. So whereas other brands will often launch the latest and greatest, the most aero, the watt saving, the lightest bike, and throw millions of dollars at a world tour team, our focus is on community, not necessarily cycling natives. We're trying to break down barriers that make our sport uninviting, inaccessible. So that's by trying to keep our prices as reasonable as possible, while still offering what I think is a really, really world-class bike. But also then creating this community and connection piece, and understanding that even I can sometimes be intimidated by this sport. And if that's me, who's raced professionally for 13 years, that's a problem. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I really answered your question, but that's Hosking
No,
Bikes. And
yeah. I wasn't looking for a particular answer. This is your origin story, not mine. So
yeah,
I can't say, oh, this is not what I was expecting to hear.
it's the wrong origin story.
I mean, okay. So there's a few things I wanted to pick up. So when I look at Hosking Bikes, there is three points, three kind of words that come to mind, and some of them, I think most of them, you touched on, which is accessibility, affordability, and inclusivity. So those are three things that kind of stand out from looking outwardly into the Hosking Bikes. And so in the more into like in for the sake of getting into the weeds here and trying to understand a bit better, because starting a bike brand, it's, from where I stand, looks like a massive undertaking. It's not something you take lightly or just start on a whim.
You are
And
correct.
you mentioned as well, that there are certain aspects of the bike industry, of the cycling industry, that still intimidate you. And I'm curious, before we get into more about the story behind the Hosking Bikes, what intimidates you about the cycling industry at present?
I think it can be a quite exclusive sport. And you're encouraged to look a certain way, to ride a certain bike, and I think that this keeps a lot of people on the edges. And what we want to do is bring people into the center page, rather than them feeling like, oh, I want to get in, but I don't know how. I'm not, and I felt it a lot through my career. I was never the skinniest, and it was always messaging I was receiving that I wasn't the typical cyclist. So I think that that's not exclusive to professional athletes. I think that it's messaging that it can be, sort of given off to people if they're looking at the marketing. They're seeing a certain type of person reflected. They're seeing, what the ideal cyclist looks like. But the reality is, like, we don't really care if you're a cyclist. We just want more people to ride bikes. So, and it's something that a woman said to me once. She said, "I'm not a cyclist, I'm a person who rides a bike." And that's what I love. So I think it's hard to say this is what intimidates me. It's a feeling.
Yeah.
And sometimes, one thing I've gotten out of cycling is this incredible confidence. My sister often tells me that I'm almost too confident. But everybody has moments where they doubt themselves, and so it's trying to create an environment where you feel safe enough to not be that cyclist in the image climbing the Pyrenees.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. And you I mean, and this is, it's it's definitely a what the cycling as it's portrayed sometimes, it's definitely seen as exclusive, and a lot of smaller brands are trying to break that down, trying to make it more inclusive, trying to open kind of and welcome more people into the sport, people that wouldn't identify themselves as the cyclist that they see uh, in marketing materials, in the media. So this is important because cyclists, or the enthusiastic cyclist, it's a very small percentage of the market. And from what you're telling me, it seems that you are aiming towards towards the bigger percentage, trying to attract people that want to ride bikes because they see the benefit, health benefit, they see the pleasure that they can gain from it, but they feel intimidated by whether it is going to a bike shop, and the people at the bike shop might look down at them because they don't know what they are talking about, or don't know what they are looking for, or they might look at the media and see the way cyclists are portrayed, and it's like, oh, I don't identify with that, so
Yeah.
I don't want to go there. So how do you kind of break this down? Because it's a very interesting positioning, because a lot of brands want to reach the wider population, but there is sometimes kind of a huge gap between wanting and doing.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no.
how do you do that? How do you reach those people that are not interested in going on a group ride, but are interested in going for loops around their
Yeah.
local park, for instance?
Yeah. And it might not even be a person who is interested in going for a local loop, right? They might not be there yet. And that's something that our brand Hosking is really aspiring to. We want to be Australians' first touch point with cycling. So we're
Oh,
really
wow.
trying
Okay.
to talk to non-cycling natives, because that's who we want to share our sport with. How do we do that? We're really looking at groups that are already active but maybe not in the cycling space. So or they're dabbling in a little bit of cycling, but it's not their focus. So we've partnered with this amazing women's triathlon in WA called Every Woman Triathlon, and that's just an incredible story. They launched in 2022. They had like 100 or so participants. Then the next year they were at 200 or something. And I was on the ground this year at this event, and there was 570 participants, all women. And at all levels of their triathlon journey, there were women rolling in bikes with baskets on them, or full triathlon, like time trial setups. So we're trying to partner with
That's amazing.
these really community grassroots focused organizations, events, who are speaking to people who want to be active and helping them find their way in cycling. So other things we're doing is we're partnering with a lot of community charity events that like have a connection with myself and my husband personally. So we're partnered with Pedal for Parkinson's, and we're their official bike partner because Jack's dad has Parkinson's, but he's still a super active cyclist. We do some work with Tour de Cure. My brother-in-law passed away from cancer almost a decade ago now. So through these organizations, we're trying to connect with people who are taking up cycling because for a purpose, for a reason, and we say that we're a purpose-driven, a for-purpose organization. So connecting with these people that share our values, share our sort of desires is really important to us. And we're also, when I talk about the first touch point for cycling, we're also do a lot in the junior space. So we've partnered with a cycling club in Brisbane, and we've kitted them out with Hosking frame sets. So it's around providing these, really good quality bikes, so they can enjoy their riding experience from the get-go. I think that one thing that's really tricky is people, when they're just getting into cycling, they'll get on a bike that just is either too big, it's super clunky, so they're not having this experience where it keeps them in the sport. We want to deliver bikes to people that are, really, really good quality bikes at affordable price points so that they enjoy their cycling experience and they continue in the sport.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting point about the quality. There's also the kind of the outreach that you're doing with working with local communities, with charities. One thing that comes to mind when there's reading Reddit columns is like looking at children's bikes. They are either too clunky, too heavy, low build quality, and there's that clear an opportunity to kind of to provide better equipment, and what you seem to be doing is exactly being at the entry point where you're opening the possibilities for young children to see the potential in riding bikes and doing it in quality with quality materials.
Yeah,
and I think that's.
Sorry.
So I mean, and from a standpoint as looking with the kind of as a consumer point of view, that's touching early on, touching in, I mean, like having those touch points within the communities, whether it is supporting events, supporting local club groups, it's that's what will make the difference in enabling more children to come and enjoy a bike ride. It will help those communities come together, and that's kind of the narrative that you can build around a brand, because it's supporting and having the purpose to support those local communities makes you stand out, makes you connect people, makes you bring that enjoyment to people's lives, and that's done through a bike, but it allows them to connect with other people around them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to our purpose, which is community connection. It's through our brand, through Hosking. It's this sort of thing that we identified was maybe missing for some people, and trying to give that, or like create a space for them. And we do that. I also run a junior cycling bunch, which is exactly what you're speaking about. It's a place for juniors to learn to build their road awareness, their bunch skills, but ultimately create a space that is theirs, because I understand that that's what kept me in the sport. When I was 14, 15, 16, it was my best friends were cyclists. So the juniors that we work with, we try to, it's their space, it's not ours.
Yeah, you're enabling that space to exist. You enable the opportunities to arise from that, and it's a crucial point as well, because you working at a grassroots level it's an important step, because the fact that we mentioned at length here is that they're opening the opportunities, creating more visibility, and bringing more children to enjoy riding bikes. And when like looking at how the cycling industry is, the representation within the cycling industry, representation within the athletes, we have to have at grassroots level, but also at leadership level, because if without the leadership, there's a lot that can be done at grassroots level, but the people, the key decision makers won't know what is happening, or are not going to be interested in changing things. And you recently said, you mentioned on a LinkedIn post, that only 15% of executives in the cycling industry are women. And you are kind of, is, I would say, in a privileged position, because you are still within the cycling industry, but you are also working outside of it. So you get to have the experience from other industries. You mentioned football, but you still have a foot in the cycling industry. And what I'm interested to know from your perspective, what needs to change to get more women into leadership positions, so that that 15% can start going up to a level where you feel comfortable with, where it is 50%, where it is more. What, in your opinion, kind of needs to change?
Yeah, I actually listened to a great podcast from one of your guests, April, I think her name is, and she made such a great point. She said, in the next, probably short period of time, the men that have been in these like industry leading positions will be retiring, and looking to fill these spots. And I think that it would be phenomenal to be seeing more women appointed to these roles. And Malcolm Gladwell, which I know, like, there's probably better academics that I could refer to than Malcolm Gladwell, but I like how he articulates things, and he speaks about how it's not necessarily enough to just have one minority person in a position, because their voice is very easily just sort of silenced. You need to grow. There needs to be more. Once there's 2, there's a voting block. Once there's 3, there's maybe a majority. So we need to continue to get more and more women into these positions, because you say I'm in a privileged position, being able to be sort of in cycling, but then bring experience from outside of our industry in. And what we're seeing outside is a very clear, both in practice and in research, that when there is a more diverse representation at the decision-making table, it benefits everybody rather than just the few. And I think there's a commercial imperative in cycling,
of course,
to do that. Yeah. We know that currently they're only reaching 30% or less of the female market, whereas they've almost saturated the men's side of it. So the biggest growth opportunities are in that side of the market. But if you're not speaking to them, if you're not considering them in decisions, if you're not factoring them into your everyday business, you're really like limiting your own growth opportunities. And so I think the simple answer is we just need to continue to advocate for and encourage and support and empower women when they get into those positions.
It's really, I mean, it's critical. It's critical to have to show that support, to also open the doors to when we see the opportunities, to open the doors and like invite them. But I mean, maybe that sounded wrong. What I mean by is that
It
by
was
that
giving
is that
very Gianni Infantino vibes. No, you can cut this out. But like at the World Cup, where he's like, "The doors are open. You just need to bang them down," and I'm like, "Well, they're clearly not open. If you need to bang them down."
yeah. I mean, it's yeah. You need to that though. It's also is being yeah, exactly. I mean, that's it. It's it's also reflecting in kind of in my position is like what I do, for instance, is making sure that all voices are represented equally, that there is a diverse range of voices, and that as equally they stand in equal footing. And I
Absolutely.
think that's when you take that into a business context, having like a board, the board having equally represented, whether that is 50-50%, however that number needs to be, so that there is a level playing field, there is a good range of voices from minorities represented within, because obviously when I say this is with in the back of my mind is the cycle industry being white male dominated. So that needs to change, and part of that change is opening the doors, but not only opening doors, but also inviting women to take leadership positions, supporting them, nurturing them through that, and and everyone can do that in their own way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
so it's
cycling has a really actually exciting opportunity ahead of it, in that to date it's been a quite an insular industry. People
Mhm.
move within the industry, they don't necessarily come from outside and bring experience in. And I think that there's a really exciting opportunity there for, in this next 5, 10, 15-year period, to be actually seeking out these like real industry leaders from other areas and bringing them into cycling. So you're bringing this best practice in, and it's
Yeah.
actually, my husband has recently started working with British Cycling, and he hadn't worked in cycling at all before that. He comes from a startup background, and you bring a fresh perspective, a new mentality, a new approach to things. And I think that that's a real opportunity ahead of cycling. So whether that's bringing women from other industries or men from other industries, I think that's a real growth potential there, and we will likely start to see that happening. We also know that people who love cycling might want to come into our industry. We saw that Fran Miller, the CEO of Rafa, she's an incredible example. She was in cycling for a long time and then stepped out and did work outside of the sport, and then has
Yeah.
brought that like rich experience from outside of cycling back in to Rafa. And how Rafa was going through a bit of a rough time, and she's come on to steady the ship and grow and improve the ship. And I think in
Yeah.
quite a short time period, she seems to be having good results. So it's an interesting sort of a watch this space, I think, in cycling.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we from where I stand, we are definitely seeing that. I mean, it might not be at the pace that as that we should be. Kind of the hitting the kind of higher pace, but we things are starting to change in terms of visibility, opportunity. But that's, I mean, that comes from my perspective, and this is only my perspective. So you seem to also share the same position, but it varies, isn't it? This is until there is like a data to back this up in terms of, well, these are the X amount of opportunities women are getting at sports at a sporting level. This is what they are getting at the boardroom level. There won't there is not there will never be enough done. I think that's where we are at the moment. We are moving
Yeah.
there, but is not
I
yet
think
there, and that's
anecdotally, it's pretty easy to still look at our industry and see that it is still heavily male dominated. So there is a lot of work to do. That's not to say there hasn't been progress. There's definitely been progress, and
yeah, for
I
sure.
have to say from my experience launching Hosking bikes, we've been so welcomed by the industry. People have been so generous with their information sharing, their willingness to jump on a call and help us learn from their mistakes. So we
Right,
would
really.
hopefully try and avoid them. So it's not that there's a gatekeeper mentality. I don't think that that's true of cycling at all. I think that it's the facilitating the opportunities and the confidence to not feel that you're an imposter, and that's will as we get more women into female founders launching businesses. We just saw the IOC president elected as the first female. When we start to see women
Yeah,
in these positions, it helps people think, if she can do it, I can do it. It's that, really that time old, you've got to see it to be it sort of mentality.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. It's just when make reflecting on what you're saying. It's there is a lot being done, but the crux of the problem, and from where I stand, and is that is a kind of societal change, a societal kind of structural problem that is shifting, where kind of within historically women have been less represented, more oppressed, not they weren't given opportunities. So that's what we're trying to change, kind of is changing that legacy and changing the narrative. And kind of within the cycling industry, we can do so much, but we also need to look outwards and understand and recognize that the problems we're trying to solve here is part of a smaller portion of what is happening around us. I'm not trying to discredit anything, by the way.
No,
I'm
no,
just
no.
trying to
I think
contextualize where we're coming from. Where,
yeah,
I mean, when I
yeah,
say we, I
absolutely.
mean woman.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
it's a discussion I have a lot. What I sort of hear you're saying or talking about is almost touching on is this equity versus equality sort of debate, and it's something that we need to be mindful of. Um, Particularly, I deal with it a lot from a opportunities point of view for female athletes, where we seem to have jumped the equity and gone straight to the equality. And
okay.
I have to remind people, female athletes are not starting from the same start line as men. So that's where you
Yeah,
need to have the equity piece. I had a matter with a young female athlete last year, and that there just seems to constantly be this, not as good as the men. But if you haven't offered the same opportunities to female athletes for 20, 30, 40 years,
exactly. Yeah.
the expectation that they're the same is just unreasonable and unrealistic. And so there needs to be a compensation given. And I think that people are still trying to get their head around that dynamic.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, it's definitely a topic of discussion that it can, it can take hours, and sometimes, and I do feel that I I do want to raise it, and it's important to talk about it, and I want to change in my own ways how I what the opportunities I give through my podcast. But it's sometimes it feels like I'm, not ill prepared. I'm not the best voice to use to use my platform to do this. So it's kind of it. If everyone in their own little way does something to move the needle, that, in the when you look at the bigger picture, you are already making a huge change. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, what I'm trying to say is that if everyone just needs to make a little adjustment, a little change, however that might be, to make sure that yes, we get to equity and equality to a level playing field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think like these conversations are really important to have. And so uh there's a bunch of studies out there that say like exactly about that, the moving the needle a little bit, right? So it's you don't need to move a mountain, but the
Yeah.
single biggest thing that an individual person can do to get closer to that gender equality in sport, but probably in life, is to call it out when you see it, rather than seeing something and thinking, me not saying anything isn't going to make a difference. If enough people
Yeah.
say something, it will make a difference. So it's that sort of like, um, you know, I'm just a single drop, but if there's 100 of us, we've almost filled a bucket sort of mentality. So I think that
Yeah.
don't feel like you're not equipped to have these conversations. You absolutely are, and it's so important. You're speaking to so many people who, if this is the first time they're engaging with this sort of issues, it's really important.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the powers of sport, actually, is to bring these conversations to people who might not necessarily engage with them.
For sure. For sure. I mean, that's yeah. I mean, sport, cycling. It's well, it can be a great leveler between different people. Once I'll caveat that once you get the past the barrier to entry. Yeah, it's definitely important, crucial, essential to have these conversations, and that's I think that's it. Will that's kind of it just continues moving the ball towards the right direction. I wanted to touch a little bit on the kind of you mentioned a little bit at the beginning of the show, at the beginning of the conversation, about how you kind of, after the breakdown of the cycling team that you were signed to, or the contract with, and you shifted your kind of your purpose, your attention, and I'm interested to go back to that and loop around the conversation towards that starting point, because what sparked your interest for in sports governance? Is that from your own experience dealing with the inequalities within women's cycling?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people talk about silver linings. I had been studying a law degree because I knew I needed something after cycling. I didn't, I
Right.
wasn't studying it with a clear purpose or intention. It just happened that when the team unraveled around me, I was almost equipped with the skills to try and grapple with this issue for athletes in the future. And I also, my experience in sport, a lot of it was underwhelming from a sports
Right.
governance, from a sports body point of view. I think I'm probably not the only female athlete to say that. You know, it's in the media. I've appealed selection
Yeah.
decisions because they decided not to select a full women's team because they didn't think that we would get a result. We ended up getting a silver
Yeah.
medal and the men got a bronze. So I have been underwhelmed, but I have that lived experience of how the systems and the structures that athletes interact with, how much of an impact that can have on their experience of the sport. And I
Yeah.
think because so many of the systems and the structures are ill-equipped to really actually deliver an experience that athletes should expect, we lose a lot of athletes from then going back into them, and then it's essentially a massive brain drain. So you're
Yeah.
not keeping them involved, and that's a real detriment to the sports, and it's disappointing. So I think that from my various experiences that I've collected from when I was selected for my first Australian team when I was 16, and they took the men to Europe for a 6-week training camp racing block, and the women to Adelaide for a 1-week training camp before the World Championships, through to when I had my professional team collapse and there were basically no protections. I have taken all that and now am really committed to and interested in trying to find ways that the systems can offer better protections, can help people experience with sport be better. And I really enjoy grappling with these issues. It's that replacement of the sort of what I got from cycling, I now get from hosking bikes and from working in this sports governance, sports law space. And it's also, there's an element there of I want to have an impact. And I think in these two areas, I can have an impact.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's drawing from your experience and putting that into practice in helping more people to stay in the sport, be better supported. I mean, we go back to the beginning where you were talking about, what happens after we retire. If we, not only what happens when you're after you retire, but what happens while you are within the sport. Are you better supported? Are there a structure, education as a commitment from the organization bodies, from the teams themselves to support the athletes that they employ? And it's so it's I think it's taking further steps to professionalizing, if you will, to making that, as the decision that people make out of passion, out of commitment to a sport, is making sure that is validated through having the right structure around them, so that they can succeed and not having to worry about being discarded at the end of a bad result, or discarded because there is no funds. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I think
I think I
it's
see what you're trying to get at, and I think actually with cycling and in this athlete space, this is going to be a really interesting space to watch over the next few years. That's where there's going to be really, really big changes from a athlete's protections point of view, athletes having representation, and
Mhm.
that really being reflected in the relationships with teams, with governing bodies, and it's not an if but when conversation. Player associations are getting stronger and stronger, and at some point, it will come into cycling, and it will be interesting to watch how the bodies interact with each other when that comes.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's we are here to see that unfold, because yes, hopefully that in I mean, hopefully will be for the better. That's what you're working towards as well,
I
because
mean,
it's
what the biggest thing that you want to see from is athletes getting more autonomy and ownership of their careers, but also having bigger safeguards around, health and safety, economic incentives, and post career. Right now, cycling is one of the few sports that doesn't have a revenue share model, despite huge
mm,
broadcast deals.
yeah.
And
Mhm.
I think that these are things that will need to be
For
negotiated
sure.
um,
Yeah,
down the line.
for sure. I mean, everyone that has a little bit of knowledge about the mechanics, the business model around cycling racing will tell you that things need to change. But the art, there's no, well, I don't know what is the solution, but I think there is clear ways of changing that. Revenue share is one of them, but it's how you implement that, how that is done, and there are, I guess, there are examples outside of cycling that um, can be followed. Um, one of the things that I want also to touch, um, and it's I think it's kind of, it maybe captures a little bit about your journey as well. It's the kind of the power that comes in a leadership position, um, and how you kind of you create that journey, from to like from growing into a leader. um, I'm, and I'm interested because you have taken so many, not so many, but you have taken different turns in your career. You have, whether it is founding Hosking Bikes, whether it is now becoming a lawyer, racing professionally. What is kind of the what best captures the kind of your journey and the philosophy, or the mindset behind that journey that you led so far?
Oh, what a hard question to answer. Um, I think that it's my values. I have a really strong set of values that have guided me both when I was cycling and continue outside of the sport in my legal profession, in founding Hosking Bikes. And it's this really a curiosity. There's a real curiosity about what I've always done,
Hmm.
and a willingness to check and challenge while guided by integrity. And so these are the consistent threads that I really try to carry in whatever I do, whether that's professionally or in my personal life, with my niece and nephew. I will, I'll always question, what did they learn from this experience? I'm trying to dig for more than, I don't know. My nephew will often say, "I don't remember." I'll say, "You do." So, and I think that because I have those really strong values, it helps to guide my decisions. It helps to
Mhm.
guide my behavior, and I know when I'm not living those values. I need to realign quickly, because then I'm not my best self. And I think actually towards the end of my career cycling, I wasn't living those values. And again, going back to the silver lining, even though it wasn't my decision to retire, I think it came at a good time. And it almost, because I had been riding and racing professionally from when I was 18, the easier
Yeah,
thing to do was to continue cycling, not
exactly.
to
Yeah.
make that like transition out of the sport. And when I had that decision almost taken out of my hands, um, it it was important for me. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's
Yeah. I mean, and building on that, I mean, it's so what I mean. It's interesting because it's so it's like you this kind of a you see it um in many different stories, in many different people, that you are put in a position that you are where you have to make a decision, and that decision is not the straightforward one. It's not the one that is the comfortable one.
mm,
um and it kind of it it, it differentiates what the values you have, the mindset you have, because you know it could have easily gone the other way, but you that was not the decision you wanted to take, um, and that put you in a different path, kind of towards much bigger things. And I think that when you stick to that, the core beliefs, the values, that you know them well, that that is a guiding line, a guiding principle, um, in your life. But it's hard to get there. It's hard to get there. I don't say that lightly.
yeah,
And
no, it
speaking from
absolutely
experience.
is. And when I speak to athletes now, particularly younger athletes, I really encourage them to figure out who they are,
Mhm.
because it's so important. What do you stand for? What's important to you? um, this is what's going to be the most important thing when you finish cycling, is that that figuring that out on the other side of sport, I think is very difficult. So making sure you have a good idea about it before it is essential.
Yeah, and it's a lifelong thing. It's not that those values are changing,
Yeah,
or being like it doesn't mean that you decide one day these are my values and that's it. I'm I'm finished.
yeah, no,
It's
absolutely. And
a
I
process.
I assessed my values at the beginning of the year, and I did some. I almost have a list, and it's like
Mhm.
MySpace. I don't know if you remember MySpace, but you would like move your friends up and
Yeah.
down. It's like you're moving your values up and down based on where they are and what you're doing at the time.
Brilliant.
So no, it's not a static sort of list.
Yeah,
Depending on what you're doing at the time, you can adjust them.
exactly. So building on that one, and looking ahead into the future, what kind of legacy do you want to leave in the cycling industry?
I'd like to be remembered as someone who was unafraid to
Hmm.
challenge what had always been done, to improve the pathway for people coming after me. And I think that that's really important to me. I'm not sure I've always done it well. I'm trying to do it better. I'm trying to bring people with me. And I will continue to hopefully improve. And actually, since I've moved out of cycling, one thing I've done very actively is seek out mentors who can help me in this. And I think I've been quite successful in that. And I have an incredible mentor that I work with, and she encourages me to, instead of necessarily poke, it's to really encourage people to ask questions. So I not necessarily telling them the answers, and that's what
Exactly.
I want to do.
Interesting. So now I have a kind of a good question for you, following on that one. So, you have looked at what you want to achieve, what is the legacy you want to leave behind. What if you go back to your 18-year-old version, young Chloe, and with the knowledge that you now have, what advice or what would you say to her?
I wouldn't give her advice, because I am so who I am now has been built on my experiences. And if I was to change any of those experiences, I would be a different person. But I'm very proud of who I am, and I believe in what I'm doing. So I think they were all essential. Some of them were shitty, and I wouldn't want to go through them again. But that doesn't mean that I would avoid them.
I mean, it's a good answer in the sense that those all the good, the bad, the great experiences that as you have lived through, where growing up until now, it's what makes you you. It's what makes the lived experience is what shapes how you look at life, the opportunities that you decide to take on. I asked the question because it's kind of it's a curveball kind of question, because it allows the person to think, well, is that something I would do differently? Is that something that and it's a great, it makes you reflect on how how you were at that time at 18, as an 18-year-old, hoping to break into the pro ranks of professional cycling, and and it with the because it's also as a kind of from my experience as a teenager, is also quite for myself, it was a time where you have a lot of confidence, you have a lot of doubts as well, but it all kind of mashes together, and somehow you come out the other side. And yes, you do have great experience, you have bad experiences, but that's what makes where you are now. Maybe sometimes people will say, oh, well, yes, I could have done that differently, and that would have put me ahead. But that depends entirely on each person. So I kind of wanted to now slightly close our conversation by asking you a question that I ask every guest that comes on the podcast, and is as a reflection of a lot about what we've been talking about, but it's very personal to everyone. And so the question is, what does success look like to you?
Success looks like always learning from my mistakes. I think it's accepting that I will never be perfect, but trying to be better than yesterday. And that's I did it as an athlete. I do it in business. I do it in the law. It's a consistent thread. So a constant pursuit of improvement.
Brilliant. It's yeah, how I would say that's probably the best way to have a kind of the best outlook for life is to there is things that you're not going to get right. There's things that
Mm,
not going to go your way. But if you have that mindset of, okay, that happened, but how can I improve? What can be done better? And that's what sets you apart, because you are able to learn and move forward with it. I'm not saying it's easy. It's probably not very easy to do, because it requires a huge effort
mm.
to learn from mistakes, be with that constant mindset of improving. Um, yeah, but having said that, not everyone is perfect. Everyone has their own as their own faults. But as an athlete, with that, that's what I believe what's brought you to the pro ranks. What allowed you to start hosking bikes, because that is that mindset that kind of makes you drive forward, gives you the with your set of values, kind of brings the purpose alongside it. So it's a yeah, it's I think it's also a mindset that a lot of when you look at um, what success can look like, and success means very different things to many different people. It's just being able to do a little bit better every time. But that's it's also very subjective.
I'll have to go back
But
and listen to what some of your other guests have said success is to them.
yeah, it's very interesting, because this question allows people to answer in multiple different ways, and some answers are very personal, some answers are more career driven, some answers are more holistic. It's it But I think ultimately it represents a little bit of the personality, of the
Absolutely.
kind of the mindset the person has. So with this said, I wanted to now kind of take you to the last part of the podcast, where I bring in a question that was left for you by another guest,
Oh,
for you to answer. So the question is this, that was left for you: if you had a magical bike bag that could fit anything in it, what snack would you pull out halfway through a ride to wow and delight the people you're riding with?
so it has to be a snack. A snack.
Yeah, that's the question. Yes.
Um, well, okay, but I'm gonna like do two things. First of all, I'm gonna, because I can fit anything in it, I'm putting in
Yes,
a
you can.
full size floor pump. So we can like get the tire, if we get a puncture, we can pump it up to like normal pressure, easy. But
Okay.
then I'm also pulling out, while the punch is being repaired, lemon slice, because that is my favorite ride food. And but it's got to be made in Victoria. Victoria does the best lemon slice. So
Hold
that's
on. Well, I don't know what is a lemon slice. Please give me a bit of context. Is that a cake? Is that
Yeah, it's basically like biscuits, like super sort
okay?
of just tea biscuits mashed up, and then with condensed milk, with like a lemon icing on top. So it's the most like old school sort of treat, but it's just delicious. My nana would make it a lot, so I've probably also got that sentimental value towards it.
Brilliant, brilliant. I mean, well, I guess the next time we get to ride together, then I'll be asking for the lemon slice.
Yeah, and don't worry, I've got a full size floor pump as well. So
Brilliant. Um, Chloe, as we come to, you know, we could have carried on talking, and that's the beauty of these conversations, is that if time was not a barrier, a lot of them could be carried on. But I wanted to just thank you for your time, for your kind of openness to talk about all your experience and a really kind of the impact that you are having within the sport, but also more specifically within the cycling industry through the work you're doing. And my kind of hope with this podcast recording is that people also see the benefits, realize that kind of the change that is happening, that you are part of it, and the good that you're bringing as well to the cycling industry. So I think that's kind of one of the key things to take from this conversation, a lot among many others that I could be here naming for an hour, but for the interest of brevity, yeah, I wanted to say that. So a huge thank you for being
Thank you, Pedro. And I could really say a similar thing straight back at you, like you taking the time to have these conversations with people from all spectrums of the industry is like, I think it's something that people appreciate. And thank you for creating this community.
Thank you. What a brilliant conversation with Chloe. I really enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this show. And let us know what part of Chloe's story most resonated with you. Until next time, keep riding, keep learning, and keep building your own path to success.